The next speaker will be Caryl Benjamin from DNV. She will be talking about marine coexistence scenarios in her presentation. Okay, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, I'm here to present the MARCO project. The North Sea is the busiest among European sea basins. But let's start with an empty sea, just showing the exclusive economic zone of Norway and the bathymetry. So the oil and gas facilities have long been there, and this includes the facilities itself, the pipelines, but also current license areas. To add to that, we have shipping. So shipping has always been there and will continue into the future. Then we have the need for food. So aquaculture occupies a big part of the coast of Norway, and this is fishing effort, represented and simplified. But then we now have the worry for offshore wind. So these are not the actual areas, but more of tentative areas to be developed for offshore wind, and we also have areas allocated for military activities. But we need to remember that there are some areas that needs protection. So we have the marine protected areas, the SVOs, which are actually good candidates probably for more protection, and fish spawning grounds that are very important to the fisheries industry. Putting this all together, then we can see, at present, we do have a very busy sea. But what does the future hold? So the future scenario would differ based on what we prioritize. So work at DNV, we do a lot of forecasting and modeling work. So this could depend on if we prioritize the upscaling of green energy, specifically offshore wind, or if we prioritize the global need for food from the ocean. And finally, the commitment to protect nature 30 by 30, as mentioned earlier. So the pressure on space will increase to 2050. Based on another research work on spatial competition, we created a spatial competition index, and by 2050, we can show that at areas near the coast, the competition will be very high. So how do we prevent this, and how do we achieve coexistence? So this question has been raised several times today, and there's different approaches on how we're going to do this. But in the MARCO project, we are going to do it through multi-stakeholder engagement. So this project brings together different stakeholders, specifically from the fisheries sector, offshore wind, offshore aquaculture, and the scientific expertise of academia. So together, we are using tools such as spatial analysis using GIS and system dynamics modeling to see dynamics over time to explore scenarios. So just as an example, this figure shows a forecast to 2050 of the upscaling of offshore wind. Given different designs of offshore wind farms, we can explore on how much space is it going to occupy. So this is baseline, low area usage, and high area usage. This is based on the DNV forecast of the energy transition. But let's add to that the Ostend ambitions based on actual goals. So based on this figure, area usage would differ actually between 3 to 12%. And that area will probably be occupied by offshore wind by 2050. But this is not just about offshore wind. We need to go back to the other industries and most specifically also to nature. So we're using system dynamics modeling to represent the Barents, Norwegian, and the North Sea, divided it into different countries, and then use the ICES areas to break it further into finer detail. And then we chose four species of fish, and modeled important life processes such as reproduction, natural mortality, and fishing mortality. And then we add into the model different mechanisms, such as catch quotas, the fishing activity, area use of the different industries in the blue economy, and finally, the concept of spatial competition. And from this fisheries stock model, we're able to get projections into the future of what will be the size of the stocks. And then this part of the model needs further validation. Given the models that we are developing, we're going to use this to explore scenarios. So we're starting with the concepts inspired from the SDG goals, wherein we can choose between protection of areas or nature protection, upscaling of offshore wind, or the prioritization of food from the ocean. So using models, we can actually explore our priorities, whether we choose to prioritize the upscaling of offshore wind, maybe establishment of more marine protected areas to reach our goals on 30 by 30, or to prioritize the global demand for food. So with modeling, we can see and assess this as a decision support tool to choose what is the future that we want. In summary, the Marco project works with model-driven scenarios as a tool for stakeholder engagement and dialogue. So this is participatory scenario building to explore alternative futures given different priorities. And lastly, the tools developed in Marco can be used as a decision support tool for planning coexistence. So Marco has been going on for 1 year, and we have 2 more years in the project. So our next steps is actually to integrate a spatially explicit cumulative impact scoring approach into our current temporal SD model. Second, we want to define our scenarios further and to engage our different stakeholders to define the variables. What ranges do we actually want to look at? And then finally, we want to present and validate the results with other ocean stakeholders. So I'm actually opening the floor to everyone here if there's people who are interested to participate in scenario building and exploring alternative scenarios in the future. I would like to invite you to a workshop session sometime in the future so that we can all participate and engage in dialogue towards coexistence. So that's all, and thank you. I have my email address here for further engagement.
Thanks very much. That was a very nice talk, and you kept very well to time, so we have plenty of time for questions. Does anyone have a question from the audience? Yes, there's a hand here.
How many different workshops do you have to develop these scenarios, and how many people do you have in each of these?
So we have been going through this already. So each stakeholder group would bring in like 1 to 2 for every meeting. So we actually have like monthly, as we develop the model, we're engaging with different groups as we define how we're going to model, like for example, fisheries or aquaculture. And then finally, for this, like something bigger would be to open it to all other groups that are interested. So not just those that are part of the project, but we're going to go beyond that to like validate the results and maybe to explore further.
Okay, any more questions from the audience? Okay, then I would say thank you very much, and we will move on to the next speaker.